Welcome back, folks. You probably had enough time for a snack. Personally, I had a peanut butter jelly sandwich. It was delicious, but not enough time for a nap. But that's okay. After this, for now, more tennis. Welcome to Eat Sleep Tennis, folks. We are here again to cover the Australian Open, this time the men's side of the draw. Now, Steve, you'll be there in person. Are you excited for all this?
I am. I'm a little annoyed that the rules have changed a little bit and I might need to wear a mask if it does start raining and they close the roof on the courts, but that's okay. I'm just glad that there is at least tennis going on, and yeah, it'll be good to get along. I think I'm heading there to day one on I think it's John Cain Arena, so hopefully there's a couple of competitive matches there to kick things off.
Now, Candace, should Steve be worried that Yulia Putintseva will find out that he's out in the world, breathing fresh air, doing whatever he wants?
Yes, that's what Twitter told me. She should be very concerned.
Let's watch out, Steve. If she finds out you're there.
I will.
Because, I mean, by the way, folks, if you're in Australia and you happen to be attending the Australian Open and you see this handsome face and this wonderful beard, he would love to answer your questions.
Say hi. He wants to give advice.
You should. You should, folks. At least buy him a beer. Maybe not a Foster's. He complains every time I bring that up, but I'm going to keep bringing that up forever. Anyway, sorry. We're supposed to be talking about tennis? What's happening here? Yeah. That's right. The Australian Open tennis. We're talking about the men's side of the draw. We covered the women's just shortly ago. If you missed that, you can find that show. The best way to find it, go on Twitter at Eat Sleep Tennis. The video link is there. The podcast is also up. But we're here for the men's draw, Steve. And do you have the first section ready for us to look at?
I do. It is up on the screen.
Novak Djokovic there at the top, Milos Raonic at the bottom of this section, Stan Wawrinka in the middle here. Some interesting American names: Taylor Fritz, Riley Opelka, Francis Tiafoe. Candace, has Novak Djokovic ever had a section this hard?
Yeah, it's a fun section. I don't know. I don't know if it's that hard. I mean, I get it. There's some names there, but they tend to be guys that he's handled really well in the past. I think he's 13 zip against Chardy. Not sure if he's ever played Travaglia. Tiafoe, we know his form is mixed at best. So I'm not too concerned for Novak, even though there are some names in there. For me, when I saw this section, my eyes went straight down towards the bottom, and that match between Corentin Moutet and John Millman. If for anything, I think that's going to be a really fun match to watch. Two guys who, especially Moutet, moves really well, fast. I think we're going to get some decent rallies out there, and it could be a long one. As far as first round wagers go, I like Moutet in there, plus 128, I think is what I was seeing. But there are two guys who we know leave it all on the court. So for anything, it's going to be a real fun one to watch. But that was the one that I saw right off the bat that I was eager, I suppose, to get invested in. Novak, I mean, he is what he is. I'm not terribly concerned about him, but the eyes for me go towards Moutet, especially if he can beat Millman. He would go against potentially Milos, but from a matchup perspective, I don't hate that one. So I'm keeping my eye there on the young Frenchman.
Now, this is going to give away the name that I've highlighted, but I have a question for you, Steve. When is the last time Novak Djokovic beat Stan Wawrinka at a Grand Slam?
It's been a while. It's I think the lucky thing, I think, for Novak is probably that Stan maybe hasn't aged as well as Novak has over the last couple of years, and it probably leans back in his favor. It's a funny little section of 16 players here. As a general rule, when you're looking for outright markets or trying to find value, you generally like to, on the men's side of things, move as far away from Novak as possible, just to hope that he gets beaten, or he's not going to hit a Lions person this time, is he, without them on the court. But it'll be interesting to see. A couple of players there. Chardy, I think, who just lost quite convincingly to Dan Evans. I think he's decided that he wants to focus on his round one match with Novak. Tiafoe Travaglia is an interesting match, but I don't see any of them being a real threat over the best of five. I think that makes it a little bit more difficult here. Riley Opelka has a first round bye against Jensen Liu, so it'll be good to see him kind of build a little bit of confidence. But yeah, look, it does come a little bit down to that. Stan, he is recovering from COVID, and mean, he looked okay through the last couple of matches that he played before he withdrew from the lead-up tournament. But, best of 5 is a completely different ball game. Tricky little section there, as you said, with Mutet, Millman, and Milosh. I do feel sorry for these players, and I'm sure a lot of them would rather not be this close to Novak in the draw, but it is hard to see, I think, on recent form, any players really challenging him over the best of 5.
And since you ducked my question here, it's been since 2015, actually. And he was here at the Australian Open that Novak beat Wawrinka. But Stan beat him in the final at the French Open in 2015. Mm-hmm. They played in 2019 at the U.S. Open. Stan beat Novak, although he retired, so maybe Novak got hurt. And then in 2016. So it's been a little while since they've played. And maybe this is more what I want to happen than what I think is going to happen. But it's just such a tough draw for Djokovic. I mean, I think Chardy obviously is going to be pretty easy. If Tiafoe can find any form, that's going to be a tough matchup there. Opelka offers a style much different than he's going to see from some of these other players. So Novak, I think, again, is really going to have to work probably just about as hard as he ever has to make it through a quarter here at a Grand Slam. I don't know if I'm going to bet on Stan, but boy, would that be fun. I hope we get to see them play there. I think it'll be a very competitive match. Any other thoughts from you guys here on this section?
I think just the first round matchup that might see, potentially someone on upset alert is that Mark Polmans versus Fucovic's match there. I know Martin has played pretty well here in the past, but, playing best of 5 off not a lot of recent tennis against Polmans, who's put in a really solid body of work and is primed for this fortnight. I'm not too fussed about his loss in the lead-up tournament. That's one to keep an eye on. It might go a little bit longer than I think bookmakers are currently predicting.
Are you going to be able to get Polmans to sign your hat?
I hope so. If I do end up on a court where he is playing, I will be taking my hat. But I'm not sure with the whole COVID regulations what they're allowed to sign. But look, we will see. Fingers crossed.
Maybe you just kind of try to throw it to him, kind of like Frisbee style or something. Worst case, he keeps the hat. You got to give Mark Polmans a hat. That would be kind of fun, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, sure. By the looks of things, I think he's got enough of them.
Let's jump down into the bottom half of the first quarter here. Gael Monfils is here at the top. Alexander Zverev at the bottom. Not too many competitive names here in the middle. I know we've talked about Kekmanovic quite a bit, but kind of a disappointing start to his season here. Mannarino is kind of a fun name here. I kind of hope we get to see him and Zverev play. They have kind of epic matches whenever they do play. Candace, what do you see here?
I see Candace is on mute.
Do you see something? But we're going to hear
about
it
now. Every time I do it on habit because I have a dog who is very young, and I never know if she's gonna bark or whimper or something. Because these shows are other than if I'm at work, these shows are the only time that she's apart from me, and she's still getting used to that idea. So I have myself on mute. Otherwise, that's the reasoning. But in this section, I was trying to say I see a lot of men who their best is a very, very high level. How often we see that is very much up in the air. I mean, right at the top is Gael Monfils, probably the poster boy for that sort of a mantra, I suppose. I actually found my eye going to two. I mean, Zverev obviously is the big name who jumps off the page, but I have a little bit of a likening here for Dusan Lajovic. He goes against Sergei Stakhovsky there to begin things. If he's able to make his way through that, he's done quite well against Aljaz Badin. If he's able to beat Bublik, if he goes against Monfils, that's one of the, if you still consider Monfils a big name in this day and age, that's one of the bigger names that you never mind going against, because in every match, even when he plays well, he always has that bit of a lull that you can take advantage of. So I'm intrigued by Dusan. I think that he has a draw that could maybe make his way through, win a couple of matches, and potentially meet up against Zverev. If it gets there, and obviously it's difficult. I don't see him making his way past the German, but regardless, a couple of matches of intrigue there for the Serb.
This is a concept we talked about in the women's show a little bit, but Zverev is really going to take a step up here and finally win a Grand Slam. It's tough being in Novak Djokovic's quarter, but given how much given how tough the opposition Novak might face is. This is a nice spot for Zverev. This is a very manageable section for him here, and he has a chance to kind of take some time, get a little form, get some confidence built up before facing Novak, who might be coming in off a couple of real battles here. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, look, it's this section I gravitate towards, as you mentioned, Manarino and Zverev, and I do have flashbacks to their US Open meeting and a couple of their matches late last year. I think it's not the easiest matchup. I think Giron in that first round for Zverev, but I think he needs to take the next step. I think we saw at the end of last year, he made the US Open final and was in a pretty commanding position there and couldn't finish off. He needs to make the most of this, and I would argue that you'd almost rather play Novak, I think, in a quarterfinal than a semi or a final. I think it's a little bit earlier on. Zverev has the experience from how he performed at the end of last year. He needs to make the most of these draws if he wants to take the next step. And looking to other names, maybe Bublik can make a little bit of a run. Gael Monfils, if you can catch him, then that's fantastic. But looking at the other names, I think, as Candace said, very hit and miss, and I think it's Zverev's for the taking. It's just whether or not he takes it.
I like what you said, Steve, about trying to catch Djokovic early. It's something that I don't think we talk a lot about in tennis, but it's something that exists a lot in other sports, kind of a look-ahead spot. I know we talk about look-ahead spots, maybe tournament to tournament, but match to match. If you catch Djokovic a little early, he might not be prepared for you as much as prepared for kind of what is going to happen the next couple of weeks. So I think you make a good point there. If somebody is going to knock Djokovic off, it's probably earlier rather than later. And maybe Zverev can do it. I'll put a little pin in that. Be coming back to that later. Anything else from you guys on this section?
No, I'm happy to move on to the next quarter.
Quarter number 2. Dominic Thiem here at the top of the section. We got PCB down there at the bottom. A couple interesting names here in the middle. We'll see what Humbert's got. Dimitrov is playing some nice tennis. We'll see if he can kind of work himself into form and kind of find some of the talent that maybe he once had. What do you see here, Steve?
I see what was probably a more interesting matchup a couple of years ago down there at the bottom with Nishikori versus Carreño Busta to kick things off. I just don't think Nishikori's played enough to really impact, I think, here and to consider in an outright perspective. You're right. You've got Carreño Busta, who's looked pretty solid, I guess, through the ATP Cup, outside of his loss to Fognini today in the semi-final. You've got Dominic Thiem at the top, who, it's a tricky little matchup to start there with Kukushkin, but a relatively more comfortable second round meeting with either Kupfer or Hugo Dellien. The names that kind of stand out through the middle there, as you said, Nick Kyrgios and Hugo Humbert, that would be a very interesting second round match. I think that there's a lot of potential there. And it does kind of highlight then that, from basically the third round onwards, that Dominic Thiem will have his work cut out for him.
Now, Candace, I can't remember the last time I heard an Australian talk about PCB on hard courts, but I don't think it was that complimentary. Don't know if that's really very important, but just thought it was worth noting. What do you see here, Candace? I mean, what sticks out to you? Anything to kind of add, or maybe who made upset the apple cart here for Dominic?
I find it hard to see Dominic getting beaten in this portion. You have guys like Kyrgios, obviously, who have a ton of ability, but again, when you're talking best of 5, it becomes more difficult to have a guy like him maybe maintaining interest. Now, obviously, you're here in Australia. Crowd involvement always gets him fired up. But again, another player who didn't necessarily look the greatest the week before the match itself. I'm more intrigued in a couple of these first or early round matches in this section. A couple of them jump off the page to me. One of them is going to be Uchiyama against Humbert. I know I was on the Uchiyama wagon last time that he played last week, and I thought he played really well. He actually should have won that match, all things being equal. He had the lead on a couple of occasions, squandered that away. He's beaten Humbert the one time they've played each other, so I think that's a very dangerous match there for the Frenchman. From a betting perspective, though, I would be looking more towards Marin Cilic against Grigor Dimitrov. I know Cilic hasn't been able to string the wins together, but I thought he looked much improved in his last defeat than he did when we saw him back in Sofia. He's always been a really hard out for Dimitrov. Again, is he the same Cilic of 5 years ago? No, but much of his portions of his game that are the most dangerous are still there. So I'm intrigued by Cilic versus Dimitrov. I was seeing plus 140 floating around there, but I'm more looking to the first round matches. I think at the end of the day, team is able to string its way through when we get deeper in the tournament.
Now, Steve, one more question here. What's Kyrgios going to do if he loses to PCB here at the end of this section? Is he going to cry?
I don't think he will. I mean, I thought I was interested to see how Borna Coric and Kyrgios interacted at the net the other day after their match, and it didn't seem like anything really unfolded. I guess the one disadvantage of, one big disappointment, I guess, post-COVID in the tennis world is the handshake has disappeared, and now it's just a bit of a wet fish kind of racket tap. But look, it'll be an interesting press conference if Nick decides to turn up in that particular spot. But look, if they were to meet here, if Nick were to get past Dominic Thiem and face PCB, I think in this little section here, then Nick could make a little bit of a run. But the big question mark, and this is from someone who's on Nick at 100-1 from many months ago before he hurt himself, that the potential's there, but the injury, and he's saying he has pain at the moment when he serves, and that's not a great sign coming into needing to win 7 matches and go best of 5 off not a lot of tennis.
You don't have to be a tennis genius to know that you need to be good at serving, and it's a big part of the game, folks. So having pain while you do that. I guess the good part about that is if PCB does beat Kyrgios, we now know he's better than Novak Djokovic. But we can move on and move ahead to the next section here. That's enough Kyrgios jokes for one moment, I guess. As we start to look at this section, Shapovalov at the top here, Schwartzman at the bottom, a lot of really fun names here. This might be one of the most fun sections, frankly, the whole draw. I mean, Shapovalov Sinner might be the best first-round match of both tournaments. That should just be a ton of fun. I'm curious to see what Sinner can do there. Now, Tomic seems interested in tennis. That's always a good thing. FAA here, again, another young Canadian who really has a chance to, I think, kind of make a mark here. And Schwartzman, just for me, always one of the most fun guys to watch. Candace, what do you see here?
Oh, I've always been a fan of Shapovalov just because he's so aggressive. He's never, really been able to refine his game to the stage, obviously still young, but when he's out there firing that he can hit lines with anybody. I thought he got a brutal draw. Can you imagine playing a really informed Sinner first round? Then you potentially have Tomic there in second round. Then you're looking to the likes of someone like Felix, who obviously he would know quite well, but that is just a brutal, brutal section of that draw. I have Felix making his way through. I've been really impressed with his play as of late. Obviously, we're going to see a little bit more of that, I suppose, before the tournament itself. But I think he's been playing really well. When you look towards the bottom end of it, I find myself relying on Schwartzman there. Again, another tried and true veteran. With it being so early in the season and so many question marks, I've said this a couple of weeks in a row, but I find myself really relying on those guys because I know what kind of form that I'm going to get from them. Maybe the more intriguing match to me is Gerasimov against Paire. Benoit never really reliable, and Gerasimov is playing quite well recently. But ultimately, I'm on the Felix wagon.
Benoit could certainly go pear-shaped indeed. Steve, what do you see here?
I have to recover from that poor joke. Look, it is tough, as I just said there, for Shapovalov, and I agree, I think, with Felix, although I think Felix's name was pronounced a little differently during the draw ceremony, so I think he's now referred to as Felix or alias Asalasalame, which was a little interesting little piece for anyone who actually sat through the entire draw ceremony yesterday and didn't fall asleep. It's Felix, it is set up for him, I think, with those first couple of rounds. And I think the strength of that, it is going to be a tough third round, whoever he faces. But then, looking to the bottom, I don't think Diego will have it all his way in that first round. And he can sometimes get a little lost and spend a little too much time on court in some of these early matches. But I agree that I think Benoit Paire is a little bit vulnerable here, had that injury and pulled out of the singles in the ATP Cup of that dead rubber. It is obviously, he didn't want to hurt himself anymore, but I haven't seen enough to kind of be inspired by him. And I think he would be, a tricky matchup, Gerasimov against, Aslan Karatsev maybe in that second round is a tricky little spot there. But, if you wanted to try and find someone who's got that consistency, I guess you would go to, Felix versus Diego or the winner. I would like to see Sinner make a run here, but it's a tough draw. I don't think that was who we would be wanting to face in the first round.
And that is the name that I have circled. if Sinner puts it together here, and I know that some people might be put off by the fact that he's having a long run the week before. We'll see what he does here shortly. Or I guess tomorrow, technically. It's hard to tell given all the time zones. I think it is shortly anyway. He's playing Hatchinoff here in a little bit. But I think even if he wins this tournament, it's so early in the season that I'm not too worried about his fatigue. I wonder if that's almost an advantage, frankly, to have that much competitive tennis under his belt and to be in that kind of form coming into that match against Shapovalov, who has struggled at slams. I just think Sinner has a chance to rip through this group. It just, like you said, Steve, it's hard. He's got the toughest draw here. I like what you said about Schwartzman. Schwartzman's got an easy path, but he is one to make a meal of a match when he should be, I think, more focused on trying to win a little bit sooner rather than later. So, whoever comes out of just that tough top half here, Shapovalov, Sinner, or FAA, I think is going to be a tough opponent for whoever comes out of the other section. Any other thoughts here, guys, before we jump into the bottom half?
No, all good from me.
All right, let's keep moving down here. And I believe this is when we get into the Russian quarter, if you will. Rublev here at the top. And not to tip the next section we're getting to, but you might be able to guess who's there. RBA here as well at the bottom. A couple interesting names here in the middle. I think we're kind of destined for a Rublev, Bautista, good 5-set kind of frankly, schedule ruiner kind of match. But hopefully they're considerate of what everyone else is doing and don't take their sweet time. What do you see here, Candace?
I'm looking similarly. I don't know if I'm in complete agreement. I agree about Rublev. I think he has things pretty comfortable there towards the top. Maybe the toughest out is Feliciano Lopez, but he has to get there first. So I don't look to Rublev to having too much trouble. When you get towards the bottom, Bautista Agut, first round should be no problem. Neither should the second, even if he played Struif, who he's been able to handle pretty easily in the past when they've played against each other. After that, though, he could potentially play Jordan Thompson, who has been playing some decent tennis as of late. It's been a long time since him and RBA have played against each other, but I don't mind the Aussie. So I have it Rublev Thompson with Rublev seeing it through.
How about you, Steve? How does this shake out in your opinion?
Look, if Rublev wants to be taken seriously at Grand Slam level, he needs to be working through these type of draws. I do tend to think that it will be that Rublev versus Bautista Agut. I made the call yesterday that life's too short to get involved with Jordan Thompson matches in any great frequency after being involved a couple of times this week. A couple to keep an eye on. It's great to see Li Tu, who is unranked, get the wild card spot yesterday just before the draw. So he's going to go from unranked to having a solid chunk of ranking points there, and could provide a little bit of a shock for Feliciano Lopez, who didn't look fantastic on court the other week. But look, it's outside of a couple of Aussie wild cards maybe making a little run there. I'm not seeing, I don't think Sonego, Query are going to cause a lot of grief in week 2 of this slam. And then look to the bottom there. I don't think Tommy Paul and Basilashvili or maybe Struff could be a little bit of a challenge for Bautista Agut. But if you had to pick the best draw here, I'd certainly be leaning towards Rublev.
So we're not worried about you, TR God, Li Tu coming through and just laying waste to this entire section, Steve?
I mean, I think everyone should be worried, but I don't quite see it. I think based off his loss to Pedro Sousa last week.
Yeah, it's a nice section here for Rublev here at the top. Bautista Agut might run into a couple speed bumps along the way. I wonder if even Struff there in that next match, or even O'Connell, frankly, is going to be that easy. If Tommy Paul or Casper Ruud's going to be there, that might be tough. I do think, though, we'll see Rublev RBA here. Any other thoughts on this section, guys, before we move on?
Nope. We will.
As hinted at before, we have the other Russian hardcourt killer, Daniel Medvedev at the bottom. David Goffin still enjoying the fruits of his somehow high enough ranking to have a 13 seed here. When's the last time he won anything?
It's been a while.
I don't know. It has been a while.
I mean, he made the semifinal in Antalya just before the quarantine period, but that's not a lot.
That's true, Antalya. That's a big event. As you start to look at some other names here, a few pop, but again, kind of similar to the top section. It looks like we'll see kind of Medvedev and kind of whoever comes out of that top section. I mean, Steve, do you think that'll be Goffin or somebody else?
I think if you had to pick on recent form, you'd probably lean towards Coric over the others. I think out of that little section of 8 there, Alexei Popyrin's a really tricky first match for Goffin. Popyrin's he looked pretty good, I think, this week. And he said he put together a pretty decent off-season because he was struggling with some injury issues last year and also at the end of 2019. So that's not an easy win to start for Goffin. But looking to the rest of it, Lloyd Harris was disappointing last week, so hard to see him making a run out of this section. And when you look to the bottom chunk there, Pospisil we haven't seen on court. I think he pulled out of the tournament this week and hasn't played, although I think he did knock off Medvedev on indoor at the end of last year, but this is a different game completely. And Krajinovic, I think, was slated to play in the ATP Cup yesterday, but had to pull out with injury as well. So that makes it a little bit harder to trust him in this section. So look, it's Medvedev's, I think, to lose here. And looking at how he's been playing through the ATP Cup, it looks like he hasn't missed a beat since finishing 2020 strongly.
How about you, Candace? Who do you see coming out of this section and who might cause them some trouble along the way?
Many of the similar names you've been speaking about. I agree that Goffin has a difficult first round match. If he can make it through that, though, things do open up, and he does have a very good record against Coric. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him string 2-3 matches here together. I actually don't mind Krajinovic. I agree. The withdrawing the week before is a little bit concerning, but obviously this is something that we see at this time of the year when people play the week before any major or in close capacity to any major. If you feel any kind of a niggle, you're going to move your way out, especially when you have a strong team overall like they did. If he's okay, I mean, his draw there is for the taking against Robin Haase to start, maybe at the likes of a Pablo Andujar. And again, health pending, Krajinovic has had a couple of tough matches there against Medvedev in the past. And if Medvedev has a difficult first-round match against Pospisil and comes into that maybe a little bit tired, I can see the upset happening. Could Medvedev just steamroll through this? Absolutely. Is it the easiest draw of the big names here? Absolutely not.
Totally agree. I mean, Krajinovic is really, I think, going to be a tough match if he makes it there. It might not be indoors, but these are the kind of conditions that he's looking for. It should be very fast. But at the same time, Medvedev is certainly the best player in this section. In my opinion, he's probably one of the guys that is going to be kind of carrying the torch once the big three start to fade out here. I think he has everything you'd want from a hardcore perspective, but I agree, Candace, this is certainly not the easiest section and definitely not the easiest quarter when you start to go back and realize he's got to play Rublev probably there just to win the quarter. Any other thoughts here, guys, before we jump into the fourth and final quarter?
No, I don't think so. I think we can head on down.
The top half of the fourth quarter, a fun section here. We've got Berrettini at the bottom, Tsitsipas at the top, another Russian there, Khachanov, the third part of the Russian big three, if you will, and they're in the middle. We've got Sumit Nagal there, Steve, and I know that Nadal isn't necessarily in this section, but I'm just going to kind of throw stuff out here. How excited are you going to be if Nagal wins this section, Nadal wins the bottom section, and we have a Nagal-Nadal quarterfinal?
I think that's just everything you could possibly hope for, isn't it?
It's a dream.
It is. And look, it's...
Will you cry for an hour, 2 hours?
Yeah.
You'd be okay? Do I need to send someone to check on you if that happens?
Yeah, you will need to put in a little bit of a welfare check, I think, because that would be quite something. I think he's up against it, considering how Berankis dominated him a couple of days ago, and now they're playing each other again. But look, this is an interesting little section. I think, you look to the bottom. I don't think Matteo Berrettini would be super thrilled to see Kevin Anderson there for round one. Anderson, not quite the Anderson of a couple of years ago, but still can be quite damaging. Carlos Alcaraz is one to watch there. I think that, that first round match of qualifiers is going to be an interesting one based on both of their recent form. I'm just generally looking at this 16 players, gravitate towards Stefanos Tsitsipas. I think he looked really good in the ATP Cup. I don't have any concerns with him over the best of 5. It's one of those ones that's, I think Gilles Simon will be a tricky matchup first up, but should help him kind of find his range a little bit over the longer format. And when you look through it, I think his draw is probably the most favorable out of this little section here, when you keep in mind that Berrettini and Khachanov are both in the bottom portion.
How about you, Candace? What do you see here?
Well, I think a lot of it for me really does rely around that match with Anderson and Berrettini. I agree it's not who he would have faced, but I think the Italian is in really nice form. I've been impressed with the consistency of his level from match to match from what we've seen of him recently. And if he can make his way past Anderson, which you always have to get yourself ready for those tie breaks, I suppose, or long match. If he can make his way through that, then I do think this bottom portion does open up a touch. Round 2 shouldn't be too difficult for him from there. And if he meets Khachanov, he has a very good record against him over fast conditions, grass, or over in Sofia on the indoor hard court. So all things being equal, if he can make it past that first round match, he should be able to make his way through, I think, that bottom portion of the draw. I have it lining up as Tsitsipas against Berrettini, with Tsitsipas winning. But I give the Italian a little bit more credit, perhaps, than Steve.
Berrettini is very hard for me. He has these moments where he looks like someone who could be very good, who could be kind of ascending to that next level and really be competitive in Grand Slams and big tournaments. And then other times, he looks very much not that way. This is obviously a really tough match for him. But, kind of maybe to take the silver lining in that, if he can get through this match with Anderson, that's a really nice first match to kind of get yourself ready to get locked into, how tough it's going to be here in these situations. Anderson loves it here. It's fast. He is going to make Berrettini work. There's a good chance that even if that's 3 sets, it's going to be an hour and a half, possibly even for each set. It could just go on forever. He's got an easy second round match there. But again, Khachanov, Tsitsipas, it's really tough for Berrettini. But I'm curious to see, again, the other side of the coin is this is an opportunity for him. If he can come through and kind of rip through this section, this maybe allows us to think about him more seriously. But I think, Steve, you kind of hit the nail on the head. This is Tsitsipas section to lose. One of the more talented players in the men's game, in my opinion, really mentally sound here. And this is just a nice section for him to work his way through. So we'll see if he gets some pushback there in kind of the last match. But I think Tsitsipas is in good shape here. Any other thoughts from you guys here before we jump into the final section?
I think the only thing maybe to mention is that looking at this bottom part of the section, it hasn't been announced yet which halves will play which day, I think in the first round of the slam. But just keeping in mind that there are a few Russian and Italians in this section here that will be playing in the ATP Cup final Sunday morning as well. So Berrettini, for example, will be playing a 3-set match against Medvedev tomorrow. So, it could be a quick turnaround. And I would imagine with a lot on the line there in the ATP Cup final that will be a fairly physical match.
Yeah, for sure. That should be fun and definitely something to keep an eye on. Hopefully the organizers will try to push some of those matches to the second day. I know they like to try to go top half, bottom half. But, if anyone from the association is listening, it would bother me if you gave some of these guys a day break and we did like quarters or whatever. Anyway, last section here, Fabio Fognini, who will also be playing in one of those ATP Cup matches at the top. Rafael Nadal who may have a back injury. I'm a little more skeptical maybe of that than some of my co-hosts here. I wonder if he's maybe taken some time off to get ready for the Australian Open more than anything, because he's actually had some success here, a couple decent runs in Australia, and I like this section for him. But let's hear what you have to say first, Candace.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a perfect off the back end of Steve mentioning some of these guys having to play and potentially a quick turnaround. If there's a guy who thrives on playing, I think it's probably Fabio Fognini. So no concern about that for him. It might help him, if anything, to be perfectly frank with you. I could see him easily beating Herbert there, and then he has what I think would be a pretty soft second round match. So I expect him to win maybe 1 or 2, maybe not a deep run perhaps, because then he'd meet the likes of an Alex de Minaur, which could be very difficult. I look for Daniel Evans to beat his countryman, Cam Norrie, and potentially string a couple of matches together. But this is really Nadal's for the taking. Nadal de Minaur could be fun if we end up getting that one. But I think similar to what you guys spoke about, earlier Djokovic, that you felt like if he was going to lose, it was going to be early. You have to feel the same way for Nadal. Historically, Nadal has usually been kind of slow into his major tournaments. And so often you'll see a match or two and you're like, oh, I don't know about this one. And then maybe around that third or fourth round, he kicks it into high gear and becomes a very difficult out. And those first couple matches for him look like they should be pretty trouble-free.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal that point later probably. But Steve, maybe a more pointed question for you before you talk about the section here. Over under 4.5 hours for Sandgren Demon Hour.
Under comfortably. Depends if tennis even turns up based off his little quarantine antics, and then
wow.
medical.
As an American, I take that as a shot.
Oh, that's a shame. I do think that when you look at that top 8 players there, it is a good opportunity for Alex de Minaur, who did look a little off in the ATP Cup. I don't know if he was trying to force the issue perhaps a little bit too much at times. I think this is a great opportunity for him over the best of 5 to build into this fortnight. He'll be quite motivated. He doesn't have any ranking points to defend from last year because he didn't actually take part due to injury. And then, as we said there to the bottom, Rafael Nadal, I think looking at this, I do have a question mark over him playing 5 sets on hard court in a really physical contest, given such little tennis. And when you look at the history and even going back to, I know he did win the 2019 US Open against Medvedev, but physically he was on his last legs there late in that match. And there's a few other examples, I guess, over the years where he hasn't perhaps looked as strong in some particularly physical contests on the hard court. So, you could make a case maybe for Alex de Minaur to make a little bit of a push there. I think if you had to look elsewhere to Nadal in this section, I'd be looking at the Australian.
So I'm going to take the bait here, and I'm taking Nadal. This is a really nice draw for him. Again, I remain maybe a little skeptical of what some of his injuries look like. Steve, you make a great point about at his age and how he plays tennis, about how hard that can be on hard courts. But I think this is oddly one of the best spots for him in hard courts in a long time. He's had a nice long break since the French Open. He should be physically about as healthy as he can be in terms of being fresh. I love this draw. Candace, you kind of touched on that. Those first couple matches, I mean, he's not going to really have any trouble until maybe Fognini or de Minaur. And even then, I mean, Fognini at his best, I love Fognini. He's one of my favorite players. But Fognini at his best, de Minaur at his best. Unless Nadal comes out and is less than 100%, I just think this section sets up really nice for him, and I'm optimistic about Mr. Nadal's chances in the tournament, if you will, to maybe foreshadow things to come. Any other thoughts, guys, on this section or the draw in general before we jump into some of our picks?
No, I think we can head over to all our ace picks for the tournament. Shall we start again with you, Alex?
Well, we could do that, or do you want to go reverse alphabetical order? Because I know you like having a specific order.
Okay.
He has to have an order. That's a new show rule.
It is a new show rule. Based off
the rule is don't skip Candace.
Well, that is also a rule. All right. Well, I'll kick things off. I've gone a little bit longer. You can obviously go for the obvious with the names at the top of the list, the former Slam winners. I've actually decided to settle on Stefanos Tsitsipas here. Not someone I would generally get involved with at Slam level, but I think, when you look at this section, he's got a good spot. And when I say good spot, he's in a quarter with Nadal. I think it's not the worst matchup for him on hard court over best of 5 at this stage of both of their careers. He's in the other half to Novak and Thiem, which I think is important, and also finds himself in a quarter that doesn't involve Rublev or Medvedev. So I think it's a good spot for him in the draw, and I think he could make a little bit of a run here. Now that, very rarely do I get involved with Tsitsipas, but knowing that I've selected him here, he'll probably now lose to someone in the first round, but that's okay. I think I can live with that. I think when you look at what he's been able to do over the ATP Cup as well, I think this is a really good spot for him to actually make a name for himself in Melbourne with, there will be a little bit of crowd support there. When I was in there the other day, the loudest fans by far were the Greek supporters. So, they will still be in there and cheering for him. And if he can continue his form, I think he's a decent chance at the current odds on offer.
I can dig it.
Good. I'm glad.
I mean,
Now-
I hope you're wrong, but we'll talk about that when I get to my pick.
Yeah, no, but we're going in reverse alphabetical order. So, Candace, who is your pick?
My pick is going to wind up being Dominic Thiem for this tournament. We spoke a bit about his quarter, I think, as far as the big names go. His quarter is one of the kinder ones. I don't find that one being too difficult for him. I actually, in my draw, had him going against Cade Nishikori before making his way to the final match of that quarter and potentially against Felix. But again, when you're talking about a quarterfinal match, that's not too shabby if you're playing against him. Obviously, we know he'd likely have to go against Djokovic. They've had many close, really fun matches. But that might be his toughest match, because even if you were to win that and make the final, and you say theoretically against Nadal, we saw what he was able to do against Nadal last year. And historically, I do think Thiem has really put himself at that level where he is on par with Djokovic and Nadal in these big tournaments. And I think he has a draw that's really going to give him the opportunity to show that.
That's a fairly compelling case. I'm happy to allow that one. I think it's going to be a little bit better than Alex's description of his particular selection. But who have you gone for, Alex?
Jesus. I don't even know if I want to. I don't know. Well, I like that. That's funny. That's funny. I like that. Good job. I did not, folks, in fact, pick Summit Nadal. I, in fact, took, as I sort of foreshadowed, Rafael Nadal. The other one, Steve. There we go. That's much better. Nadal.
Easy mistake to make.
He was trying to. He was a
you Australians, you can't hear right. It takes long. He lives on the other side of the world, folks. It's a long time for the sound to get there. We all know how Whisperer Down the Lane goes. Anyway, Rafael Nadal, as I talked about earlier, I really like his draw. I think this sets up nicely for him. As I start to think about what it takes to win a Grand Slam, he is someone that knows what he needs to do over the next 2 weeks, what it requires of him to do well here. As Candace so aptly mentioned, he's got a nice start here, these couple first matches. He's probably got Tsitsipas there, maybe Berrettini, maybe Khachanov. I'm not so concerned. I think at that point, Nadal is going to kind of work his way into some form here. Not that he even looked bad. I just like him there. As you start to look at the third quarter, he's got to play Rublev. He's got to play Medvedev. Those guys just have such a tough draw. And in a year where, again, Novak Djokovic, this is just brutal for him. I'm happy to look for somebody else. I'm happy to go the other direction. And, since we're just trying to pick a winner here, I'm not going to bet on Nadal. I'm not going to play his number. I don't think there's any value in that. But like his draw here, I like his setup, and I think he has a great chance to win here. So he'll be my pick to take the Steve, do you know the name of the Australian Open trophy? I know these trophies have goofy names, but I can't remember.
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to have a think. I feel like the women's one's the Ackhurst, but anyway, we can look into that. I love it when I get a question without notice on a live show. That always works very, very well.
I was just one is being trolled on your outright pick.
Yeah, well, that's fair. Fair play. I have picked, so for my value selection for this one, I think following along what you were saying there about, there is, I guess, some, and when we talked through that first quarter, wanting to kind of catch Novak around the quarterfinals is not the worst place to catch him. I think Zverev looked pretty decent against Novak the other day when they played in the ATP Cup. He did have to go big on his second serve and take some risks, but I'd rather see him take those risks against Novak than to just put in second serves at a really poor service speed and find them, hit all over the court by Novak. I think, his price maybe, given that early stages of his draw, I think there is a little bit of value there, and then you can maybe reassess if he were to meet Novak in that quarterfinal. But I think, he's closing the gap, I think, from what we've seen, in the back end of last year. And I think, as I said, that finding Novak in the quarterfinals not the worst round to meet him.
So I did find the trophy names, by the way. It's the Norman Brooks Challenge Cup and the Daphne Ackhurst Memorial Cup.
There we go. I got 1 out of 2. That's a pass.
Do you know who either of those people are?
They are former tennis players, Alex.
That's apparently true. Did you know that, or was that a guess?
Well, I've just put 2 and 2 together, and if they've named they've named the trophy after them, I'm assuming they're involved in tennis in some capacity.
It's a good guess. It's very logical.
Thank you. Moving over to Candace, who is your value pick for the tournament?
Well, if anybody watched the WTA show, or if you're planning on watching it, what you would know is that Steve and I's value plays were in the similar portion to the draw. And the same thing is exactly the case here. I'm going to be going with Moutet. Similar philosophy when I talked about my women's pick, but I'm just looking for kind of people who are going to be long odds, who could potentially make their way through a couple of matches, who could be interesting to play match to match because they're going to be underdogs. And that's the way that I view him. I like him again, first round against Millman. If he were to go against Milos second round, he's the right player to try to beat Milos, really make him move, quick player. After that, potentially Wawrinka, who, again, older, hasn't looked great either. I mean, Djokovic, who knows? But if he makes it that far, you've hopefully strung together enough matches where you're already in the green and a happy camper. But even if you were to play Djokovic, it would be a really fun match again. Not a guy who I think that Djokovic would be able to, just move his way off the court for 5 sets. Moutet has shown himself capable of hanging in a long, tough match. He's shown himself incapable, at least to this stage, of backing that up in the next match. So not a guy necessarily to win the tournament, but one that I'm intrigued with going match to match, assuming none of these matches goes 4 hours or something crazy. But he's a player in general I'm really excited for this year. And obviously he does more than tennis. He's like a rapper and a pianist and a very cultured man. So Moutet, the one for me.
What is it about tennis and rapping?
I don't know. French guys seem to like rapping too. French athletes, that is.
Too much time. Too much time.
Wrinkle. People would never have thought of tennis as big rappers, but I think there's probably as many tennis rap albums in the last 5 to 10 years as there are NBA rap albums.
I think rap.
Something.
Yeah, I think rap and music in general. I mean, I know Diana Yastremska's probably got a little bit of time to work on her second album over the coming months.
That's true. That's more of a pop thing. I mean, she'll got a lot of time. I'm sure she'll figure something out.
Yeah,
I'm not too worried about Yastremska.
Yeah,
she's got a lot of time to work on those injuries.
Yeah. Alrighty. Now back to the men. Alex, who was your value pick?
In a similar theme to a lot of these shows, Steve and I have copied each other here. I like Alexander Zverev here. If I've said it once, I've said it probably a dozen times by now. This is a rough setup for Djokovic, and Zverev has one of the nicest spots in the draw, in my opinion. His section is very easy. His toughest match before he gets to Djokovic, if Djokovic is even there, is probably Monfils, and that should be too much trouble for him. I know that he's actually had some success against Djokovic, so even if that is Djokovic there, I think that he will have a chance to knock him off if Novak isn't 100% in that match. And then he's looking at a rematch against Thiem in I have a lot of struggles with the U.S. Open final from last year. I watched it. I'm not sure why I kept watching it, but I did. It's some of the worst tennis I've seen, but at the same time, probably 5 of the best shots I've ever seen in a tennis match were in that tennis match. I hope it's much better this time. And I think that Zverev is someone that is not going to shy away from kind of that failure from last year. I think that he's actually going to embrace that, and that might actually help him kind of succeed in this moment. And again, I'm kind of putting a lot of things together here, but when you're doing a value pick, that's what you're looking for, an opportunity, and for someone who's a little underrated, who really has that high ceiling. And I think that if Zverev comes out and plays his best tennis here for 2 weeks, he has a great chance to win this tournament.
I mean, I agree. So I think we can just move right along to our overvalued players. So we'll continue we won't go in alphabetical order. I'll jump in again. I have gone as my overvalued player, Andrei Rublev. I think he's got a tricky little spot, I think, with Medvedev in the same quarter. I don't think that's what he would have been hoping for looking at the draw overall. But I just think he's a little bit short considering, in a lot of ways, when you compare him to all the other top players in this field, he is still largely unproven at Grand Slam level, and particularly over that best of 5. So I think there's a couple of question marks there. I think he should make the second week. I'm not thinking he'll get knocked out early, but I just don't know, looking at his price, that there's any value in him, considering he'd probably need to go through Medvedev to get out of the quarter, and then potentially come up against, a Tsitsipas or a Nadal in a semi-final to then meet either, Novak or Thiem likely in the final. I think it's a tough ask for him. I think his best tennis is very, very good. I'm just a little worried that he may not be able to sustain it over the best of 5 to the same extent we've seen over best of 3 in the last 12 months.
That would be a big step up for him.
Definitely. Now, Candice, who have you gone for?
Well, here in America, when I was a kid, we had these books, and they were called Mad Libs. And I don't know if they have those in Australia or other countries, but they're basically a book where there's like sentences, and then there's blank spaces where you just ask people a word, and they tell you a word, and you put it in the blank space. So that's what I'd be playing right now for your Rublev argument, and just instead of Rublev everywhere, I'm going to insert Medvedev everywhere. Again, very similar portion to the draw. Not an easy one, I thought, compared to Rublev. The draw for Medvedev was harder with Pospisil first round, potentially against Krajinovic if he's able to play well, all things considered with the injury. He does not have a good record against Krajinovic. Even if he were to make it past that, Medvedev against Goffin, they played each other 3 times in 2019, and a couple of those were not pretty, even if he was able to get the victory. And then his potential reward for that is playing against his countryman, and they've had some tight ones as well, obviously looking back to the US Open. So to me, obviously Medvedev more proven than Rublev in Grand Slams, but I thought from the odds I was seeing that Medvedev was being treated as if he's a Grand Slam winner, and he's not. And he does not have a kind draw at all. So I'm going to go with Daniil Medvedev.
I feel like one of us is going to be in a little bit of trouble considering that quarter and that we've gone for Rublev and Medvedev, but that's okay. We will push on. Alex.
Maybe they'll both lose.
Oh, well,
that's what we need.
Exactly. Now, Alex, to finish things off, who's your overvalued player?
I think this will come as no surprise to just about everybody. If I've said it once, I've said it twice. Joker has just got the worst of this here. And to talk about it from a little different angle here, I actually already have some money on Novak, but it's money that I bet months ago. He was plus 150 to plus 200 at certain places to win this tournament. As the best hard court player in the world, I thought that was kind of disrespectful. But I wasn't planning on this. I wasn't planning on him being absolutely challenged every single match for the entire tournament. I wasn't expecting him to have to run through this gauntlet. So for him to have been plus 150, plus 140, a month ago, and then to have this draw come out, and all of a sudden now he's plus 120. How on earth do you take that price and knock it down? How is he more likely to win this tournament after the draw than he was before? This is just mind-boggling to me that the market would react in such a way to this. So I think you need your head examined if you're going to try to grab some Novak outright here. I think you're going to do much better if you want to do a money line rollover. And he might win it. Again, the best hard court men's player in the world. He might be the best hard court tennis player ever. We're not going to have that conversation unless you guys really feel like having it. But if he plays great, if he plays his very best, he could win this tournament. But I'm certainly not betting on it at close to even odds. That's just beyond insane to me. So very overvalued.
And I think when you look at his price and where his price point is now, looking at the quality of the rest of the field, you need to consider it over a number of slams where he is that same price. And when you're looking at it, so looking at the US Open last year, he was a similar price, wasn't able to, come away, wasn't able to get out of the quarter. And then, was around that kind of $3 mark, I think, for the French Open, and wasn't able to get through it. So I think it's looking at it over a larger sample size. Yes, in this instance, he may get through and win, but just there isn't that value, I think, in that price at the moment when you look at the overall field.
That's exactly the thing. I think it's a very price-centric argument. Like, I'm not as bullish as Alex is that his draw is necessarily bad. Wawrinka aside, it's guys that he's really handled well in the past. But I think the point is that even if he were able to win, the price that he is just ludicrous.
You can have more fun, I think, at different prices across the fortnight, across a number of different matches, I think, than getting involved at that price for Novak to go through and win 7 matches, I think, here.
Much better ways to spend your money.
Definitely. All righty. I think that is a wrap for the men's draw. I think we've got through that in pretty decent timing. Alex
stayed awake for all of it.
Tried my best. I'm ready for some sleep, folks.
Yeah.
By the way, if you thought we did a bad job, let us know. We don't really want to know. If you thought we did a good job, that would be better to hear. But we love constructive criticism. You can find us on Twitter at Eat Sleep Tennis. All three of us are on Twitter. I think you're Candace_hair. I'm at _noobs. Steve is Ace_PDs.
Candace hair _
Damn it.
If you want to let us know about all of our losers, you can head over to Alex's Twitter and let him know.
Yeah, my Twitter is at Jorge TWTS Tennis. Send all your negative DMs to there. If you have anything nice to say, use another account. It's at _noobs. It looks like me, but it's just like another account. Like you just send all the negative stuff to that first one. That's really me.
Otherwise, I guess good luck to everyone who's getting involved in some capacity over the next fortnight. We'll be involved in, trying to put up some content here and there. So obviously on Twitter and also est.show on Instagram. There is also Instagram. Yes, that's right. You're too old for that. So you're not involved with the Instagram.
It's my job. Got to keep it to the youngins.
Exactly. And also
I'm not going to tell you what that sounds like to me, but I assume it's social media. Instagram. What would they deliver?
I think I'm just going to pop you on mute for the rest of this, Alex. And I think we're also on YouTube at Eat Sleep Tennis Show and also on Facebook. We've just started a small little private group on there as well, where there's just a couple of people in there. So if you do want to jump in and request access into that. I think Alex is involved in that because it's a little bit older. I know Alex is more of a MySpace man.
Yeah, I let Steve in there. Somehow Steve couldn't let himself in.
Yeah, that's fine. We figured it out. But
responsibility for me, but thanks.
Exactly. But I think, you'll see our logo there if you search for Eat Sleep Tennis Show on there, and we can request access. We'll send you in there, and we'll try and put some different pieces of content across all the different platforms. So not everything's everywhere. But trying to keep a hold overall. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in live over the last nearly an hour, and for anyone who's listening back on the podcast, make sure you do follow or subscribe to whichever platform works best for you. And if you are able to send us a rating, preferably a good one. I know Alex has been a little bit off the last couple of days with his picks, but hopefully that can improve with your selection of Nagal to win. So. We'll see. I think I might.
I won money on matches that should have been canceled.
Yeah, no, you've
honestly,
done
some of those totals. I hope people tailed me on Bookmaker. They paid those. I don't know why, but
wait. I want my credit for Italy. We didn't mention that, guys. Just casually left that off.
I'm sorry. Is Italy won, or do they still have to play Russia?
Well, that's the thing.
They beat you guys.
Oh no, Alex and our pick is Russia.
The French.
So you guys picked Russia for the whole thing?
Yeah.
So I need my value play to beat your actual pick. Oh, okay. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So and I'll be there live. So I'll make sure that I really do cheer for the Russians. And I think when we do have a look through some of our selections from last week, I think there are a few that are still alive. I think we've got, there's Contivate, I think, for Candace.
You remember now.
I do remember now. And this is why she's still alive, I think, because I did forget it at the time. And I think also Alex and I think we had Felix. So I think he's still alive in the Murray River Open. And we also had Sinner in the Great Ocean Road Open as well. So he's still alive. A lot of them, to be fair, a lot of them have been thrown into chaos with everyone withdrawing. But that's okay. Maybe you can find a little bit of value out of that. But we will hopefully amongst all those previews across the men's and women's for the Australian Open, we find a winner or two.
That's the plan.
That is the plan. Fingers crossed. All righty, we'll be back maybe in a couple of days or, to give a little bit of an update on the Australian Open. But in the meantime, all the best. And hopefully the Australian Open gets off to a COVID-free start.